I'm Steve Coll. I'm the author of Private Empire, ExxonMobil American Power. Wear lots of other hats too, but that's the main one at the moment. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they both strands of the original Standard Oil mission are present in Exxon, and there are many people in the business who will say that of all the baby standards that evolved out of the 1911 breakup, Exxon has always been closest to the parent in its culture and its sense of itself. The most rigid, the most conservative, the most influenced still by religiosity in the workplace and in the culture of the corporation. And also the most hardline, the most ruthless, the most inclined to play hardball the way Rockefeller did before he entered his philanthropic phase. And so you can still see this sense of conservative religious mission present in the corporation's outlook on the world, but they remain ideologically committed to capitalism above all else. And I mean, the current chief executive, Rex Tillerson, who was the son of a mid-level Boy Scout administrator in Texas and grew up in an East Texas town, a very Boy Scout-driven and religious household. His mother was also deeply religious, and he's now very active in the Boy Scouts of America and active in his church and in the Republican Party. All of that would be, okay, that's a corporate Texas life, except he recently told Scouting Magazine that his favorite book is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And you think, okay, right now where the colors are getting a little bit shaded over on another side. And so I think there is this real ideology that has been born of their conflicts in the last 20, 30 years with regulators, the environmental movement, Greenpeace, the media. They live in a kind of strategic defensive crouch. They hold on to their original kind of Baptist culture, but they also are really mad at their enemies. And they see the government as hostile to them. They see many other forces in society as not willing to give them a break or to understand who they are. And that I think has impeded their potential to evolve in these directions, whether it was influenced by the Rockefeller family's example of broad-minded philanthropy, or whether it was influenced by other corporations, different kinds of social responsibility strategies or so forth. They're down in a strategic crouch, ready to shoot first and ask questions later. I wonder. I mean, on the one hand, they would say, look at our numbers. What's wrong with what we're doing? But the answer is, I mean, part of the explanation for their numbers, of course, much of the explanation for their numbers is that the oil industry is a kind of utility that is pretty idiot-proof. If you can run it, if you can run an oil company reasonably well, you're going to make lots of money, at least in this price environment. They run their company better than most, so they make even more money. And they're enormous, so they have enormous benefits of scale. So is that durable? It has been durable. Will it be durable for another 30 to 40 years? There's a couple of reasons to question. One is Chad and the examples elsewhere in the book of their position in troubled societies, which is not going to change. The resource nationalism that drove them into these settings is not going away. Demonstrates, I think, and it's not the only example, but it's enough. The oil industry, the energy industry is increasingly a world of partnerships. It's hard to do it yourself anymore. You're going to have to partner with governments, you're going to have to partner with communities, non-governmental organizations, you're going to have to take account of the media. In this global environment where information is flat, available to everyone, you cannot hide in a box, and you can't be a bad partner. And they are seen as closed, and they're not seen by even their industry peers as good partners. They're prickly, arrogant, and headstrong. And that is not a prescription, I don't think, for success over 30 or 40 years in the world we're moving into, especially a world where American relative power is in decline. And the other factor is that we haven't talked about this, but in order to compete against the very largest state-owned oil companies in the world, because they're the largest corporation headquartered in the United States, but you make a list of oil companies worldwide, including those owned by governments, they're not even in the top 10. Their competitive advantage is science and technology and engineering. They compete with the Chinese in Africa by saying, we can do oil drilling that nobody else can do. We can do it in deeper water. We can do it in harsher climates. We can pipe it across landscapes that no one else can pipe it across. We can do that safely, and we can do it on time and on budget, and you'll make lots of money. And that claim, which is valid in general terms, reflects their ability to stay ahead of global competition on science, engineering, and geological exploration and insight. So they're a science company, and an engineering company, maybe even more. Well, can you really attract and retain in the world? The Chinese are going to get better and better and better. The Russians are, may not get better and better and better because they're a political economy, but Indian and Chinese and other global Brazilian competition is going to rise. The quality of that competition is going to rise. Can they maintain their edge with a workforce that is so closed, so insular, unfriendly to women, not very globalized, not where people go home to their Thanksgiving dinner and say, I work at Exxon, and everyone draws in their breath. I don't, what scientists are like. They're not going to thrive if they can't open their windows a little bit, I think, and develop a talent culture that is a little bit less rigid than the one that they possess now. I mean, that's at least a question that I would ask. It does to an extent, although there I think that's at least inside the lines of what they do, which is energy, so energy broadly defined. They're interested, I think, genuinely in watching the alternative energy space defensively, so they study it very carefully. They're an enormous incumbency that has a very profitable business model that presumes the role of oil in the transportation economy. They're naturally going to resist changes in technology that would threaten the primacy of oil fuels in the global transportation economy. That's a threat to them. But other kinds of changes in the energy economy that might be enacted for environmental reasons, particularly a price on carbon to address the dangers of global warming, they're already adjusting to that by partly by necessity and partly by choice, by shifting towards natural gas, which they see as a winner in a carbon-constrained 21st century. It's easier for them to access gas anymore than it is for them to access oil, so that they're making a virtue of a necessity to some extent by doubling down on gas. Also, the United States is, of course, in the midst of a potential kind of unconventional natural gas boom. That allows them to come back into the free market West and enjoy the property rights of ownership. If they can find the gas here, they can own it in an uncomplicated way. The political risk is different. Now they have to deal with environmentalists who are concerned about the damage that fracking industrialization causes. So anyway, it's complicated. I think their view of alternatives is that they have an incumbent business that they like, and they don't want to run themselves out of business. As to wind and solar, that's a power generation story. They're not, gas puts them in the power generation business, but they don't want to be. I don't think there's any philosophical reason why they wouldn't incrementally go into power generation, whether it was hydro or geothermal or solar or wind. It doesn't threaten their business. It's just not what they don't see scale in it and profitability in it the way they see it in oil.